Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. And after a little over a year, it's time to return back to the world of anime and DC Comics' very own Bleach legacy. What if Superman was in Bleach? As we now continue into Season 2, we cover the events of the Soul Society arc. Now, I know a lot of people have given their different thoughts and opinions as to what I should have done with the Superman character. And ultimately, why did I decide with a crossover with Bleach? Well, for one, I think that the themes and the story of Bleach could pair well with the story of Superman, one of the most optimistic and hopeful characters in a series with characters who oftentimes are the antithesis of that level of hope. If you have the bright and hopeful side of Superman, then you kind of have the cynicism of the Soul Society itself and the clashing ideals that come from both, as well as putting Superman in a particular universe with characters who are strong enough and capable enough of actually pushing him and giving him a challenge outside of just using the whole kryptonite thing. So all in all, I think this series has definitely been a good balance of story along with the power scaling, and I have a lot of fun ideas in store, and I've had a lot of fun writing the script for the Soul Society arc. I really think you guys are going to enjoy it and like everything that is to come now and in the future. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. As always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Today was the last day of school for Ichigo and Clark, respectively. As teachers were drowning on and on with their summer vacation preambles, students going about saying their final goodbyes and making their summer plans and preparations for the eventful season that was to come, for Ichigo and Clark, they found themselves staring and drifting out of the window, looking at the dull clouds that went across the blue sky. Normally a day that for many in their youth was filled with joy and anticipation for the adventures that were to come on a summer vacation, for Ichigo and Clark, they had other things on their mind. Like how just 48 hours ago, they found themselves lying in pools of their own blood in the streets of Kurakura Town, as two mystery assailants from the Soul Society had arrived and taken Rukia back. What was worse, Rukia was scheduled to be executed, and they only had but a short period of time to get her back. But for Ichigo and for Clark, their minds drifted for two different reasons. For Ichigo, it was the thought of potentially losing a friend that up until now he never realized just how much that friend meant to him. There was also the fear for his brother. When someone that's always been invincible to you finally goes down, it can be rather jarring. And for Clark, it was an experience, to say the least. His entire life, he had never so much as spilled a drop of blood. Nothing had ever harmed him. Nothing seemingly could. Of course, that didn't mean that he went out of his way to get himself into trouble or to do anything that could harm him. It was just that nothing did. It didn't matter how high he fell. It didn't matter what he ran into. It didn't matter what should have cut him deeply. Nothing seemed to harm him. And yet, without even blinking, he felt his body fall limply to the ground. Blood splattering from his chest where he had been cut through by Byakuya. It left him with a surreal moment that had him questioning his own mortality. Was he really as strong as he thought he was? There were beings out there in the world this powerful, but perhaps he should have always known that. After all, it's not like he was an ordinary human to begin with. There were bound to be powerful foes out there who could actually do damage to him, but still, it's a lot different from imagining what pain would feel like to actually experiencing it. And now, the fate of Rukia, their chances of saving her, it lied in the hands of Mr. Hattenclogs, or, as he was known, Kisuke Urahara, the man who was going to be taking over the boys' training to get them prepared for what was to come. Of course, much to Ichigo and Clark's surprise, they weren't the only ones that noticed Rukia's disappearance. To the vast majority, it was like she never really existed. Though then again, she was never from this world to start, so perhaps it made sense. But Urahara, obviously, along with Orihime, Lois, and Chad, they had also taken note of Rukia's disappearance. Ichigo and Clark explained what happened to the group, and it left them rather perplexed on what they were going to do. Though it didn't take long for them to realize that Ichigo and Clark were going to go out and save Rukia. They just wanted to help any way that they could. As for Ichigo and Clark respectively, their training would begin immediately once school was over. As Kisuke had put it, typically speaking, in the case of Rukia, even in the case of an execution, the Soul Society followed its own laws. Execution wasn't something that just happened immediately with a short trial. No, there was a time period, 30 days at most, assuming that was the time frame that they had to work with. They would have 10 days to train, then 7 days for Kisuke to open the barrier to the Soul Society, and then from there, they'd have roughly 14 to 13 days to rescue Rukia. That was how much time they were working with, and Soul Society was a large-scaled environment. It wasn't going to be as simple as just showing up at the front door, smashing down the gates, causing a prison break, and booking it out of there as soon as possible. No, it was going to take everything they had and then some. And before they could even think about planning an escape, Kisuke had to get both boys up to par. But he was looking forward to the challenge at least. Wow, who would have thunk it? A large training facility under my own shop. Yeah, Ichigo would say. You've obviously known about this place already. So what the hell are we doing here? It's simple, really. You both have high potential, and I plan on dragging it out to the forefront. If you're really serious about saving your friend Rukia, that is, then it's going to take everything you've got. You're going to have to go through hell and back, and even then, that still might not be enough. What do you mean it might not be enough? Clark would say. Well, my well-behaved Kryptonian friend, let's just say you're about to enter into a whole new world, and you're going to encounter a lot of powerful people, truly indeed strong. These aren't the type of people that you take lightly, because these are the type of people that will turn you into nothing more but a face on a t-shirt that only your parents would mourn. Sorry about the last choice of words. That was really insensitive. Ichigo looked more annoyed than anything else. Kisuke would tap his cane before tapping both boys on the forehead, causing their souls to leave their bodies as they collapsed to the ground, a chain connecting them. For Ichigo, it wasn't too bad of an experience. After all, this wasn't the first time he had to operate with his soul detached from his body. It was how he had been using his soul reaper powers to begin with Rukia. But for Clark, this was entirely different. It was so surreal. The way his soul form felt, it was different from his, alive form, his real body. He felt so weak, Kisuke said with a grin. That's probably what you're thinking, huh? This doesn't feel anything like my ordinary body. Well, that's because the soul and the body are two totally different things. Huh? Clark would say. Alright, here's a better way of putting it. Your body, in a roundabout way, is like a suit of armor for your soul. For a soul reaper, in their soul form, that gives them access to their soul power. Soul power is what's used by the soul reaper to carry out their duties as a Shinigami. But to regular folk, or for non-soul reapers, a soul is far different from what your body is capable of. You, Clark, are a Kryptonian. The Kryptonian body is a fine specimen of work, especially when put in the right environment. Environment? I can tell you a little bit about Krypton. Krypton's gravity is far different from Earth's. If you had been born and raised on Krypton, well, you were born, but you weren't raised there. If you had been raised on Krypton, you would feel like any ordinary human. And I'd imagine that anything on Krypton, like say a heavy weight, a knife, things of that nature, would probably hurt you and do severe damage. That's because Krypton was surrounded by a red sun. Red sun rays that was absorbed through your skin and through the center of gravity of Krypton itself, being a planet with a higher form of gravity, it meant that your bodies were toughened up by the factors that you were created in. However, when you ended up coming to this planet, you came to a planet that not only had a yellow sun, but a planet with gravity that was far less taxing on the body. So, safe to say, you came to this planet with a very, very powerful body compared to the average individual. Wait, so am I actually powerful, or is it just where I'm from? It's a combination of things. No need to boggle down with any just one. I would say that any Kryptonian, if they were to come to Earth, would instantly get a power boost. But the difference is, they would only get a power boost on top of the strength they already had. You, my friend, were, for all intents and purposes, raised in an environment conducive to your power. Or, if I had to say, what's a better way of putting it? If the average Kryptonian is a store-bought pastry, and I'm talking a delicious store-bought pastry, you're something akin to being homemade. Now, is homemade and store-bought equally valuable and equally good? Yeah, but let's just be for real. There's something about that homemade that just hits a spot that store-bought just can never seem to fully encapture. That, my friend, is what you are. But enough about the semantics. All you need to focus on is this. You have a soul, Clark. And in order to maximize your capabilities, we need to get your soul power to full capacity. So what? Am I going to become a Shinigami or something like Ichigo? No. Your case is far different from Ichigo. You just haven't realized it yet. Well, without further ado, let's get into phase 1 of your training. Uri, please step forward.
Yes, sir.
A small, shy, and timid girl would step forward with what appeared to be boxing gloves. She handed a pair to both Ichigo and Clark respectively, along with some protective headgear. What's with the sparring match gear, huh? Is she gonna train us or something? Ichigo would ask.
Training is,
I would suggest that you run. Run? Why would we need to... Before they even had a chance to finish that sentence, the little girl was acting like a Terminator, chasing behind them, with each kick and punches she threw devastating the ground and leaving a crater in its wake. Safe to say, If there was ever a reason to be terrified of little girls, it's because you never knew when they were potentially capable of, well, severing your head from your shoulders with one swift motion. For Ichigo, this felt like the norm, but for Clark, this was an entirely different experience. Outside of his fight with Byakuya, this was now a time when he truly felt like he was capable of dying, that death was actually imminent for him. If anything, his senses became a lot more sharpened. It's easy to go through life when you don't have to worry about things that the average person has to worry about. You don't have to worry that the car crash will kill you, or that the mugger with the knife or the gun might kill you, or that even if a building were to collapse, that you wouldn't come out of it unharmed. It created this dull sense within Clark. Sure, he had to always keep his power a secret, and he went to great lengths to do so. But at the same time, he always had this level of calmness to him. Like there was never a situation that was truly out of his control. But now all of that had gone out the window. Now, he actually felt what it meant to have a true fight or flight response. What it meant to be in a situation where your life was actually on the line and for forfeit. And worse, at the hands of what appeared to be nothing more but a 7-year-old girl. Eventually, though, the boys would have no choice but to try to engage in combat. They both went in for simultaneous punches, Clark pulling away at the last moment because even in the midst of this situation, he just couldn't bring himself to hit a child. Ichigo didn't have those problems. He believed in equality for all. That included age equality, when it came to fighting, of course. Nothing like that. We're not doing not like us around here. But that's besides the point. Point is, it was fight or flight. And they chose to fight, which ended horribly, as she went in for simultaneous punches, ready to take them out. But they just barely managed to dodge. They got themselves positioned, ready to continue the battle, when Kisuke would tap his cane, telling them that the match was over. They had passed the first test. The soul, when it's in danger of being destroyed or damaged, can heighten its abilities and its senses to great lengths. This matchup wasn't to see whether or not they could win the fight. It was to see if they were even capable of surviving. Of course, if they hadn't, they would have died. But then again, if you're not training to potentially die, then are you even training at all? With Phase 1 complete, that left them in the Phase 2. Kisuke's assistant, Mr. Tsukabashi, would take a great axe and sever the chains that was connecting them to their bodies. As he did so, the two boys would fall faintly to the ground as Mr. Tsukabashi would use one of his keto sealing techniques, binding their arms behind their backs as a pole would manifest right underneath them, and they went plummeting down to the dark depths below. Kisuke would give both Uriuri and Jinta props, the two artificial soul children that were his assistants as well, similar to a situation with Kon. I gotta say, Uriuri, you did some fantastic work. I do my best, sir. Yeah, thing's pretty deep. Ain't no way in hell those guys are getting out of there. I can't move my arms, Clark would say. Yeah, I think we're being bound up. Forgive me, Tsukabashi would tell them, as he descended into the hole to greet the two boys. I do not wish to make things uncomfortable, but I will have to keep these restraints on you until your trial is over. Trial? What trial? It's the next part of your test and training. Your Phase 2, my friends. You're going to have to get out of this hole. And you're not going to have access to your power or to your arms. Makes things a lot more fun that way. Wait a second. Can I just fly? Clark would try to jump into the air, only to go crashing back down. Did you forget what I told you, Clark? Your soul form isn't like your real form. All those powers and privileges that you had now, well, they've been stripped from you. Now all you have is your own strength and your soul power, and with your arms behind your back for added measure. No, you won't be leaping tall buildings in a single bound anytime soon. Well, not unless you think you've got the hops to get out of here. And I'd suggest you hurry up and do so, because if you don't, things are gonna get pretty bad for you. Bad? What do you mean by, ugh, what is that? Both boys would look down at the chains that were protruding from their chest, looking at each chain link turned into some sort of mouth-like monster that was eating itself. Oh, did I not tell you? When I severed the chain that connected your souls to your body, well, that puts you into a precarious situation. You see, those chains serve a very important purpose. They keep you tethered. Without it, you eventually lose yourself to the madness of being a soul without a vessel. And when that happens, well, that's how hollows are formed, my friends. Did he just give us the birds and the bees of becoming a hollow? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And what happens then? Clark said. Oh, if you turn into a hollow, then we'll have no choice but to go down there and kill you. Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I stutter or something? Here, let me use this megaphone. If you turn into a hollow, we will come down there and kill you. We heard you the first time, you jerk, Ichigo would say. What are you trying to do? Get us killed? Get you killed? No. If you crawl out of the hole, you have nothing to worry about. Don't you get it? I'm testing your resolve, my friend, to see if you truly have what it takes. If you can't crawl out of the hole now, then what's even the point of going to Soul Society? I don't think you fully understand what this training is about. It's not about you lying around bitching and complaining to me. When you, hypothetically, assuming you survive this, get to the Soul Society, do you really think that those soul captains are going to give a damn about who you are or what you want? Remember what I told you. When the weak go around making demands, it never ends well for them. You're stepping into the lion's den. If you're weak, if there's even an ounce of a defect in you, it will be taken advantage of and you will be destroyed. You're dealing with a group of beings who are savage at heart, who are capable of destroying you multiple ways from Sunday. And if you go in there hacked-cocked, thinking that just with a little bit of training and determination, that's all it's going to take to win, then you're better off just dying here and now. The one thing that's not going to happen is that I'm not going to half-ass this and send you off to die. No, I'd be doing you a favor by just killing you here. Because at least then, you won't have a false sense of hope, of believing that you actually stood a chance at something, even though you were destined to fail. So, for now, I would strongly advise that you both put those noggins together and focus on getting out of that hole. Because if you don't, it's bye-bye. As Ichigo and Clark would continue in their ordeal of attempting to escape, they wouldn't be the only ones making preparations. Chad, Orihime, and Lois had been called to an abandoned factory by a cat, a talking black cat named Yoriichi, who claimed that the talking cat, was going to train them so that they could be prepared to help both Ichigo and Clark in their rescue attempt of Rukia. Of course, there are many things to take into account. For one, 3 teens being trained by a talking cat. Yeah, safe to say for Lois, this wasn't how she planned on spending her summer vacation. But then again, this would be the story of a lifetime. A story that, in the grand scheme of things, it's not like she could actually publish. Because who in their right mind would actually believe this? Yes, I went on an adventure with my friends to the world of soul reapers and shinigami. I battled against monstrous demons and other folk to save the life of a shinigami girl who came to our school posing as a high schooler, despite being hundreds of years old. Yeah, that'll definitely sell in the press. Probably sell well to Shonen Jump, maybe. Although, then again, who would actually even write a story like that? There's no way it would actually sell or anything. A story about teenage Shinigami. Oh, please. And what's next? They're gonna write a story about some ninja boy who had the fox demon sealed inside of him? Or maybe some boy about some kid who ate a weird fruit and got strange powers and chose to become a pirate. Ooh, here's a good one. Someone could just plagiarize the story of Sun Wukong, spin it, turn it around into whatever, and become a global icon that sells to millions around the world, but in particular Mexico. Was Lois getting a little too detailed with this charade of a scenario? Probably, but then again, that's what this situation kind of felt like, to say the least. But Yoruichi would be calm and patient when training the three. They had all been in some key situations involving hollows and things of that nature, and they'd managed to come out on the other side. They had potential, all of it riding within them. But there was also something else. Each child had something that was unique, something that was pulling to them. For Orihime, outside of her hair pendant fairies, there was something at home. Ever since she'd come into contact with shinigamis and hollows, it had been calling to her. It was an old box, a family heirloom, from her late uncle. She'd never even opened it or thought much about it. Her uncle was from the United States, married over into the family, but tragically passed away a while ago. But still, Orihime did remember him when she was younger, and she always liked her Uncle Guy Gardner. But what was in this box that was pulling to her? She remembered opening it and bringing it to her training session with Yoruichi, explaining that for some reason she felt like she needed it. The cat's eyes would open with widen in excitement, because Orihime had in her hands a green lantern ring. She wasn't the only one that experienced this phenomena. For Lois, who was living in Japan with her grandparents, staying as a foreign exchange student from the United States, of course, she too had a strange phenomena. It started when she arrived back home, and, well, she found something in the attic. It looked like a phone, a clock. Well, not specifically, it was a dial, like a phone hand dial thingy. She wasn't entirely sure why, but for some reason she felt drawn to it. And then there was Chad. And for some reason, the one item that he felt was calling to him, the one thing that seemed to almost speak to him on a deeper level, strangely enough, was the most randomest of items. When Clark had shown his closest friends the truth about himself, the secret spaceship buried in the backyard of the Kurosaki family home, as they uncovered the mysteries behind Clark's origins, inside of that ship, among many of the miscellaneous items, there was a sledgehammer. For some reason, Chad wanted it, and he asked Clark if he could have it, and Clark gave it to him, without any rhyme or reason. Of course, many thought that it was kind of strange of all the things that were in the ship, A dusty old sledgehammer was the first thing that caught his eye. But for Chad, there was something about it. He wasn't entirely sure why. The sledgehammer had that same insignia on both side ends of the hammer itself. That insignia that Clark wore in his red and blue suit. For some reason, that insignia, it was inspiring. Chad never said it aloud, but he was a little bit of a comic nerd in his own right. He remembered growing up with his grandfather and reading comics and watching Saturday morning cartoons. The stories of heroes, larger-than-life legends, big and strong and yet kind and soft. People who would defend the weak and protect the innocent. To stand as a shield, a sign of hope. To see Clark in that role, it was inspiring to him. And Ichigo, in a similar vein. He's never forgotten that day under the bridge when Ichigo had helped him out. Clark and Ichigo respectively, they were always moving ahead. The people that seemed so nonchalant, and yet they were the first ones ready to offer you the shirt on their back if need be. It may not have been much in the grand scheme of things, but their role and determination, it inspired Chad. And in a similar vein, he wanted to follow suit. Even if he couldn't do much in this world, if his actions could benefit someone else in any way to do unto others, then he felt like it was his obligation to do such a thing. Yoruichi could see that all three of them had potential, especially when it came to training and mastering their spirit power. If anything, they had higher potential than even they themselves realized. Potential that was quickly being brought to the forefront. In the meantime, as both Clark and Ichigo remained inside of that dingy dark hole, they felt a strange euphoria washing over them. Even Urahara was starting to get worried along with Uri and Jinta. Mr. Tsukabishi, who was in the hole with them, had to use all of his power to try to restrain them from transforming into hollows. They were ready to assist at need be, but Kisuke wanted to wait to see what would happen to the both of them. Within their own minds, respectively, both Ichigo and Clark would have a vision. For Ichigo, that vision came in the form of meeting a strange man who seemed to be floating in the air. A man that Ichigo knew, but his name he could not recall. The man that showed him the way to the hilt of his Zanpakuto. Ichigo knew for a fact that he had never seen this man a day in his life, and yet within his own heart, he felt as familiar as family. Like he was someone who had always been a part of him. But the name, it only continued to escape his mind. And as for Clark, he found himself in the presence of someone who seemed vaguely familiar. An older individual, and yet when he looked into his face, he saw his own. Was it him? It couldn't be, but yet he felt like it was. Why was he here? What was the meaning of all this for the both of them? The vision would quickly dissipate. But even through the midst of the storm, they found themselves through one collectively shared objective. Now was not the time to die. Yes, death would come to them at some point. Death came for everyone. That was inescapable, but if there was one thing they could control, it was when they would choose to die. And for them, death was not going to come in this hole. It was not going to take them now, not when they had so much left to do. Rukia was waiting for them, and they couldn't let her down. Kisuke would watch as two bright lights would emanate from the deep and sunken hole in the training area. And standing before them, what appeared to be Ichigo himself, clad in the black robes of the Soul Reaper, but with the mask of a hollow. And as for Clark, he found himself in similar garb, only the clothing was that of red and blue, but he as well also sporting a mask. Ichigo would reach for the hilt of his Zanpakuto, still a broken blade, as he grabbed hold of the hilt and cracked his mask, freeing himself and revealing his face. As for Clark, with his bare hand, he took hold of the mask and cracked it open, breaking it free and revealing himself. And Kisuke stood rather impressed. Well now, you two have exceeded my expectations. Consider phase 2 complete. Ichigo, your Soul Reaper powers have been restored. And for Clark, I must say, the garb of the Soul Reaper suits you nicely. Maybe, Clark would say, but it's not for me. With all due respect, I'd like to go back to my old body now. Have you finally figured it out? I think I have. And what's that? Ichigo would ask. Well, you have your Zanpakuto, brother. What? You couldn't find yours? No. I didn't need to find it. It's always been here. What do you mean? My body, Ichigo. My very body is my Zanpakuto. Your body? I don't It's a lot different for him, Ichigo. His body is far different from anything else. It's not like yours. A human soul and a human body, they're almost in sync. But for Clark, his soul and his body are two totally different things. It's about the upbringing. He might be a Kryptonian, but he was raised on Earth. He has the understanding of a human, the mind of a human, the understanding, comprehension. All of that is human nature for him. But there's a totally different nature that lies dormant. His Kryptonian nature. His humanity became the soul. But his Kryptonian heritage, that is all within the body. And his body, in and of itself, is his own Zanpakuto. So you're saying that his whole body is not necessarily a Zanpakuto, Kisuke would explain, but he can use it like one. Is that what you're getting at, Clark? Precisely. With Kisuke's help, Clark would re-enter into his body, the Shinigami-like form that he had taken, now turning back into his traditional hero-like form that he had been given by his father. The classic red and blue tights and the bellowing red cape behind him. It feels different. It almost feels like I'm driving a car. My body doesn't even feel like my body anymore. It feels like you're inside of a Zanpakuto. It's fine. Now all you have to do is become one with it. The both of you. Once you do that, you'll reach a whole new echelon of power. And now, it's time to start the third part of your training. Phase 3. Don't worry, This time you won't have to deal with a time limit. All you'll have to do is knock this hat off my head. Knocking your hat off your head, huh? And what? You didn't want to give us a time limit because you think it's going to take forever? I wanted to give you a fair shot, that's all. Nah, I don't think we're going to need that. Do you, Clark? No, I don't think we're going to need that either. How about 5 minutes? Ho ho. You sure about that, kids? 5 minutes with me. You know, 5 minutes can be a long ass time. Before Kisuke even had a chance to think about it, Ichigo swung his broken blade towards him. He had to dodge. Okay. Oh, I like that. It seems our Soul Reapers come back with a little bit of moxie, even dragging your poor little brother into it. Shame, Ichigo. We really gotta fix those bad habits of yours. Kisuke firmly planted his hat on his head as he broke apart his cane and pulled out his sword. This is my Zanpakuto. Both brothers felt the weight of Kisuke's aura, his spiritual pressure, eclipsing theirs and weighing them down within the room. Now, what was that you said about 5 minutes? Okay. You get 5 minutes to knock my hat off. But let's sweeten the pot. If you get 5 minutes to try to knock my hat off, then I get 5 minutes to try to kill you. A look of dread then came over both of their faces, and Kisuke continued to smile that wicked grin. Don't back out on me now, boys. You wanted this, right? Well, I hope you're prepared. Class is in session, and your final exam starts now. This concludes Bleach Legacy. What if Superman was in Bleach? Season 2, Part 1. As always, if you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that's to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned tomorrow as we continue with Bleach Legacy, What If Superman Was in Bleach, Season 2, Part 2. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.